Hello and welcome back to another episode of Mystery Red Reads. I'm your host, Mystery Red, and this is a trigger warning. This story covers material that may be upsetting to some viewers or readers. This is my disclaimer. This beta read in Concord is at the author's request. This video is for learning purposes. Today we're looking at a memoir. I am looking at an alternate version of Chapter 1 for A Soul Exchange by No-Ant-5039. They are contemplating their format for their memoir. They have written, their original format is in letter format, and this version is a narrative for comparison and for us to muse over which format serves the memoir best. So, we're going to go up here to my note. This is a test for me to see what I like better. I'm afraid I'll always wonder if I don't try to see this, so this will help affirm my decision in format. I agree 100%. When you're not sure, try it both ways. My chapter breaks will be really different because there are big structural changes to overlap multiple events chronologically. Anyway, you'll notice some errors I haven't edited out yet. This is more to see format than line edits. So from a big perspective, can you read this and weigh in if you like it better than previous letters? Something you've said here is popping up to my head, to my mind. I don't know where your current word count is, and I do not have my notes offhand of what I found was the typical word count for a memoir, but that is something you might consider if you are struggling to reach your minimum word count. Switching to a narrative format may be beneficial because you're going to have to fill those gaps for flow. So that is food for thought. Okay, here we go. Black and Milds by the Back Door. An Aspiring Pilot, Part 1. Between our house and the neighbors, the street lamp spills a warm glow onto the sidewalk, illuminating restless shadows. The cold wind whips through the apple tree, its branches grazing the window with a subtle tap. I prop a second pillow against the wall, shifting upright in acceptance that dozing back off is unrealistic. With my family asleep down the hall, my conscience dredges up thoughts of a former lover, an intrusion amongst other more invited memories. The image that comes to mind is like a mineral growing on a rock. I don't know if on is the right descriptive word, perhaps in, through, intertwined, or enmeshed. A manicured dark beard accentuated the angles of Evan's face. His green eyes, framed by smile lines, cast a mischievous twinkle that held me captive for years. Even now, I can easily re-envision his freckles, dense along his broad shoulders. Pausing. Okay, so I messed up on that. Sorry. Even now, I can easily re-envision his freckles, dense along his broad shoulders, leaving the comfort of those worn flannel sheets he and I would slip out the bay window of his parents' house for a smoke. I'm going to pause for a couple of reasons. One, I'm trying to do this read in carpool, and I was hoping it would be quiet, but as soon as these people walking down the sidewalk go, the dogs will stop barking. Also, I want to put a note on the re-envision part. Okay. A manicured dark beard accentuated the angles. Nope. Okay, I'm going to try this one more time. Plus, I realized that I was trying to put a note on here, and it's not letting me. I'm not really sure why. I don't think it's a setting because you've got me under suggesting. I don't know if it's because my computer was trying to connect to my phone, which I told it I did not want to do. I'm not really sure why it's not wanting to, let's see. I don't know why it's not letting me add a note. It could be. Actually, maybe I need to connect and that'll stop it from doing that. Let me do a personal hotspot. That might work. The two will link, and then I'll be able to make my edits. Okay. It looks like it did. Okay, let's see if it lets me do it now. There we go. It was all locked up. Okay. Re-envision. Is that correct? Re-envision. I'm going to play with it over here. I think it just needs an I right here. Nope, that's wrong. Re-envision. That can't, is that really how you spell it? It looks so weird. Is it really? I mean, it's not flagging it your way. It just looks so weird. Okay. Wow. When you don't, sometimes you see a word and you don't see it very often and you're like, that can't be right. That looks so weird. I'm having that moment. I'm having that moment right now. Okay. Even now, I can easily re-envision his freckles dense along his broad shoulders, leaving the comfort of those worn flannel sheets that he and I would slip out. Okay, so something about this sentence is not working for me, and I don't want to linger on it because we're looking at the overall format. So I'm just going to mark it and keep going, and then maybe we'll come back to it. Given the opportunity to tell anyone our story, I would light up, reliving the flutter of butterflies in my belly. Standing under the monkey bars by the field, my nerves ran interference between reality and the sweat slicking our intertwined hands. Our friends went as far as shutting us in the treehouse at my 7th grade birthday party. There had been big talk and playing spin the bottle as Truth or Dare was losing steam. Perhaps the problem was the ratio of boys to girls, but more likely it was the cowardice selection of truths. Even if someone could have come up with a good question, how interesting are the secrets of 7th graders? Prior to the party, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror speculating how far to part my lips or if he'd use tongue. My mind was so concerned with where to put my hands and if the toothpaste would remain minty freshness on my breath that I struggled to enjoy the celebration at all. I'm going to highlight that one, and we'll come back to these. From within the plywood structure, our friends snickering against the double door, we both concentrated on our shoes in silence. My cheeks singed as we agreed to walk out, neither confirming nor denying the events or lack thereof. All these years later, the door still reads M+E=love in pink paint. Evan and I had been exchanging text messages, but until that moment, looking up at him on my doorstep, I still reimagined him as a pubescent classmate. Standing there, soaking in his playful smile, I couldn't have been more wrong. A natural starting place would be to say I loved Evan. My understanding and experience with love was malnourished and deficient to say the least, but my feelings were sincere. He was my first true love. This is sadly ironic considering I was 28. I was a 28-year-old divorcee. Evan showed me there was this spark inside of me, and while it no longer burns for him, I'm grateful he lit my path. Something about being on his arm healed that awkward, gangly 7th grade version of myself. Though, remembering the dumb Gemini tattoo on his other shoulder makes me cringe. Between the garage and footpath, Evan's mom kept an abandoned garden shed and a greenhouse. At the base, a carpet of waxy green ice plants sprawled in clumps, their fuchsia flowers soft-bristled and vibrant against the dewy succulents. Inside, shelves served as storage cluttered with stacks of terracotta pots, baskets, and her old rock tumbler. I tossed my memories in like jade, where they clattered together in a microcosm of chaos, softening amongst the grit, and I emerged softened too. It takes a newfound gentleness to lift the lid from this barrel of memory conglomerate. With Christmas just around the corner, Evan told me to bundle up in warm layers. At our small-town airport, he retrieved a noise-canceling headset and a stick of fresh gum from his trunk. Smiling, he placed the headset over my ears, his fingers brushing back my hair before handing me some gum. Okay. I squirmed in the seat of the tiny Cessna, watching as he circled the plane, clipboard in hand, cross-checking everything with precision. I'm going to mark this for us later. My cheeks ached from smiling as we ascended into the night sky, the city lights below glowing like colorful globes. In that rush of excitement, I understood his dream, to follow in his father's footsteps and become a pilot. Back then, our relationship was brand new, and for all his love of maneuvering through the clouds, I never would have guessed he'd struggled to find the motivation to study for the necessary written exams. Okay, really quick, I'm going to highlight these for later too. The propellers of that first flight whipped the night sky, still turning in my memory. Like my drinking, my recollection of our relationship encapsulates the romance and thrill. The thoughts that swarm in the dead of night never concentrate on the lies. Hours would pass. Evan would call to say he was on his way over to my house, but the 12-minute drive stretched into hours. On countless occasions, he went home after a movie, tired, but then I would wake up to text messages at 2 and 3. Instead of sleeping, he was fishing on the pier with Devin. And what happened the night he crashed his car, driving out the tunnel by the gym? He didn't report the accident. No. In a convenient forgetfulness, these realities never surface. I wouldn't be delving into every nook and cranny of our past without mention of the tree and Evan's body limp at the trunk. I thought he was dead. His 6-foot frame crumbled up over his legs, small and deflated. Blood pooled under his ear. I dared not move him. Surely a body couldn't fold that way. I can't recall what I did with the dog leash and Rosie, who Evan had been taunting from up in the branches. There was no cell reception. Torn to leave, adrenaline propelled my legs in the direction of the cattle gate, sprinting toward the trail to catch a bar. The 911 call was nothing short of a trauma. Words left my mouth, their meaning I hadn't yet processed. In the next breath, I phoned his dad and told him a helicopter was on its way. Back under the oak canopy, I called out, "You're okay. You're going to be okay. I need you to be okay." There was an unsettling loneliness about being in the cow pasture with his husk of a body, still unmoving and unconscious. After what felt like a lifetime, I heard sirens from down the canyon. I sang out in relief. "That's for you, Evan. Do you hear that?" Over and over, I repeated the words. He started to come to, lashes rising and falling in a fast flutter, his lips twisted into a boyish, cheeky grin. "Do you hear the sirens? That's help. They're coming for you." "For me?" he asked in disbelief. "What happened?" "You fell out of the tree, remember? You climbed up there to mess with Rosie and piss me off," I added. "No way. But it's okay. You're going to be okay." Disoriented, Evan wanted to know what happened again, over and over. "For me? No way," he muttered, his shock equally genuine each time. Language as I know it can't describe the feelings that washed over me when I saw a white truck in the distance bouncing our way. It bobbed and weaved around the hardy oak trees, arriving at last some 40 yards out. Relief, hope, and desperation penetrated my adrenaline as I hung on to the fire chief's words. He explained how he had been on his way home when the call came in and he changed course. Breaking the lock of the cattle gate, the chief followed the rancher's dirt road in the direction I had specified to the emergency operator. "The helicopter will spook your dog. She may bolt. You're going to want to hold on to her over here." Relieved to be busy with the task, I held Rosie's collar, sitting, a witness to the surreal scene. Another white pickup truck appeared with 2 men in the cab and one riding in the back. They squatted over Evan, assessing his position and demeanor at a leisurely pace that didn't match my urgent fear. They instructed him to follow something with his eyes as they waved it over his face, asking a series of questions of which he couldn't answer. His concentration was soon broken by the distinct vibration of propeller blades slicing the air, signaling the helicopter was approaching. Right on cue, Rosie Girl started to tremble. My clenched fingers whitened around her collar. She squirmed, dipping her head in an attempt to shake free of me. The helicopter lowered with a swift grace, hovering a few final moments before touching down on the tall grass. A team jumped into action. Next thing I knew, they had Evan's neck braced and were hoisting him in one fell swoop over a red stretcher. They were quick to load him in the helicopter, destined for the nearest trauma center. The chief swung the passenger door open and gestured me inside. Rosie leapt onto my lap and pressed her nose out the partially open window. I held her tight, a sole source of comfort in the chaos. So is the play on words there deliberate? I'm going to keep going. A new level of shock coursed through me as we emerged from the pasture to the road beyond. Neighbors and hikers were gathered around the backdrop of a fire engine. My stomach sank upon spotting Evan's dad's sob. He was standing in front of the car talking to my mom. Like the sudden slackening of a snapped rope, the adrenaline that had moved my legs down the trail called 911 and kept me functioning. It all dissipated. Hungry for air, I gasped into a guttural cry. "You have to compose yourself before you go to the hospital. You can't drive this upset," my mom coached. "Take some time. There's no rush," his dad reasoned. "There is nothing any of us can do right now anyway." His dad was a tall man with impeccable posture. Though stern, his Swedish accent lent a softness to his words. Throughout the entire ordeal under the tree, I dreaded the depth of grief his parents must be facing. Yet here he was, comforting me. I don't remember touching Evan, but I must have because there was blood on my sweatshirt and somehow the crowd handed me a change of clothing to wear to the hospital. Oh, someone, sorry. Once I managed to slow my breathing back to a consistent ease, I left Rosie with my mom. I anticipated hours, if not days, by his side at the hospital. I had already convinced myself his back was broken. Quite the contrary. Evan emerged essentially unscathed. A handful of stitches around his ear accompanied a concussion and a shoulder injury that required a sling. Some bumps and minor cuts, but nothing, not a thing was broken. A jarring twist, and not the only one. It was an emotional whiplash to consider we had gone for that hike to discuss the trajectory of our young relationship. After all the lies, I was breaking up with him. While in hindsight, the revelation of his daily use made sense of his bizarre sleep patterns and lackluster follow-through in bed, I was sincerely blindsided, catching him in a web of lies. Evan stood there in front of me, as if I was the crazy one. But even still, I couldn't leave him then, not while he needed me to take care of him. I didn't understand the dysfunctional bond I constructed around us based on the trauma of this fall. At that moment, I told myself that leaving him in his injured state would be cruel. How could anyone else understand what he was going through? How could anyone else understand what I was going through? And perhaps it wasn't just the accident that tethered us. Okay, I'm going to redo that paragraph because I am in the city and I cannot help that it is a very busy part of the city. Very busy. Okay. At that moment, I told myself that leaving him in his injured state would be cruel. How could anyone else understand what he was going through? How could anyone else understand what I was going through? And perhaps it wasn't just the accident that tethered us, but the belief that I could somehow fix him. I wanted to believe that my love, my nurturing care, could be that turning point. Deep down, I must have known he wouldn't leave his addiction for me, but it wouldn't be the first time I chased a fantasy. Confusing codependency for love. It's codependence. Sorry. Confusing codependence for love and mistaking staying for strength, my boundaries blurred. My desire to help him eclipsed my need to protect myself. Staying gave me a twisted sense of purpose. In fact, in a weird way, I was excited to play the role of nurse and smother him with affection, like a mineral growing on a rock. Evan wasn't the type to comply with bed rest or doctor's orders. Was it because he couldn't stand to be cooped up, or because he needed another fix? The night after his fall marked a pivotal moment, not just in my memories, but in the course of my life. Devin and some of the guys were going fishing in the canals along Interstate 5. Attempts to convince Evan to stay home and rest were useless. With a bottle of whiskey in the back seat, I conceded to tag along with some illusion of control motivated by my distrust. I knew that there would be, and I knew I was going to try it. In my mind, it was the thing he loved more than me, and I was hurting no one but myself when I bent over the tailgate in the dark almond orchard and inhaled that first through a rolled-up $5 bill. Blanket. A drink would take the edge off. At this point, divorced, living back at home, and lost, I had already fallen in love with alcohol. I found it to be a daily reprieve, and I reveled in the energy a buzz gave me. I have this version of myself. Hair, a blonde, tangled mess pulled back in a fishtail braid. That teal maxi skirt that demanded your eyes to my hips and stretched down to my ankles brushed my flip-flops as I sat on the cooler in Devin's backyard. The little-known secret. We'd get those February heat waves. Okay, I'm going to try that again because of all the lovely city sounds that I have no control over. I have this vision of myself, hair, a blonde tangled mess pulled back in a fishtail braid. That teal maxi skirt that demanded your eyes to my hips and stretched down to my ankles brushed my flip-flops as I sat on the cooler in Devin's backyard. Little-known local secret, we'd get those February heat waves where the sun's rays penetrate your skin. After a few in a row, I had a healthy kiss of color on my cheeks and chest. Evan pulled the Sailor Jerry's and root beer bottles out of the black plastic bag and took a sip off each, demonstrating the frivolousness of cups. I would scarcely drink from a glass again over the next 4 years. What's perhaps most insightful about this flashback is how cute I look in my mind's eye. I romanticize the carefree, sunny afternoon, looking young and beautiful by Evan's side. My memories depreciate like a TV leaving the Costco parking lot. More accurately, I proceeded to trip over the skirt riding Devin's daughter's scooter and scrape my face on the merciless concrete. Beautiful. Blood dripped from my chin and eyebrow before turning into a scab surrounded by yellow bruising. He and I were inseparable, so I'd been sleeping over in his childhood room. How am I going to explain this to your parents? I panicked, overwhelmed with embarrassment on our car ride home. A rock bottom and a rock through my window. Part 2. Okay, so I'm going to pause at the end of part 1. Let's see, part 2 goes on. Okay. Do you think, let's see, did you want me to read both part 1 and part 2? I'm kind of going to scroll back up here. Let's see, this is a test from received version. I don't think, did you specify up here? Okay, depending on your answer, below is a video to aspiring pilot as a narrative. But if you think letters, okay. So, I was as curious as you were as to which version I would like better. I have to say I do love this version because it reads more like a novel, but you have to keep in mind that is more my thing. So that's, I'm probably going to lean that way because it's more my comfort zone. It's more what I'm attuned to. It's more what I'm used to, what I know, and that's kind of my personal preference. So I do like the narrative version. However, I'm also satisfied with the letter version. So I don't know if this made the decision harder or better. Now, one thing you might do is maybe I tried to read through the whole segment so you would get a feel for what it's going to sound like. And I tried to just highlight anything that I would have pointed out to go back and mention so that you could get the experience without all the commentary that I usually give you. And then I stopped here before part 2 to kind of give you the sample. So I hope it did that for you and you can kind of come to an impression of which way you want to go. One of the motivating factors for making a decision one way or the other may be the word count. You are definitely going to pick up words by switching to a narrative. Okay. It's also going to demand you to give up. Okay. It's also going to demand you. It's also going to do. Sorry. The cacophony of sounds that come off into the city, you often don't really notice them until you're trying to film a video. And it's probably not the best place to do that, but I have to take the time that I've got because I don't have a lot. So basically, you will pick up words in a narrative. It's also going to demand that you pull forth and give up all those things that I kind of been trying to drag out of you here and there in various places. Because you're gonna have to fill in gaps and answer questions. If they say to write more like a novel anyway, I mean, I feel like through my encouragement in certain places you did give up more, but sometimes I ask for like your internal thought as to like what was your thought right before you did this action. That this is some place where that would further expand. You can already do it in your letter, but switching to a narrative is really gonna kind of fill in that you're going to kind of have to give up that thought that come before you make a choice. Like wherever I was prompting you before and saying, okay, what was your thought right before you did blah, blah, blah. And I know I've said it probably, I feel like only a few times because generally you're giving up a whole lot anyway. And you write such a clean, I don't know how many drafts you've done of this, but you write very clean. Okay. And your voice is excellent. You're just the whole thing. You got all the, you're crossing off all the marks, okay? Your writing is really good. But it's going to, expanding in those little thoughts that come before is also going to help connect things. If you switch to the narrative version, I feel like it's probably also going to be another place. If you are looking for word count and you need to reach it, you're going to get it by switching to a narrative. So if that's a clincher for you, that is actually something to consider. I do like the way it reads both ways, but I like your writing and I like your voice. So maybe submit this version I'm going to go ahead and point out the little things I highlighted in yellow, and then maybe submit this version for critique and see what comes back out of that. That might also be insightful. I love this. I like this too. I just love your voice though. So I don't know. I'm kind of biased. I like your writing style. I like that we have a similar kind of voice when we write. Let me look at these little parts in yellow really quick. I feel like I'm not really helping you make a decision because I like it too. I like both. I do. Okay. Let's see. Leaving the comfort of those worn flannel sheets, he and I would slip out the bay window of his parents' house for a smoke. Okay, when I read this sentence, leaving the comfort of those worn flannel sheets, he and I would slip out the bay window of his parents' house for a smoke. Okay, this little half of the sentence right here, the bay window of his parents' house for a smoke, seems a little bit, you're giving an action sentence, okay? You have something happening. You are leaving the comfort of the sheets and you're slipping out the window. I feel like for an action sentence, it's a little bit long. Leaving the comfort of those worn flannel sheets, he and I would slip out the window of his parents' house to smoke. Just to tighten it up, cut out a couple of extra words. I don't need to know that it's a bay window. I love your visuals, but when I read this, it seemed like a little bit of a stretch. And I couldn't figure out at first why, and I didn't want it to disrupt my read, so I just highlighted it to move on. But if I'm looking at it, leaving the comfort of the flannel sheets, he and I would slip out the window of his parents' house to smoke. So you're just cutting a few words here or there to tighten up the sentence, and it'll read a little bit cleaner. I know that this was not really what you were looking at for this draft, for this purpose, but I just want to cover it before I leave. My mind was so concerned with where to put my hands and if the toothpaste would maintain minty freshness on my breath that I struggled to enjoy the celebration at all. That one's just a little bit long. I like the details, but it is a little bit long. I'd either look for a break or potentially a comma and maybe see if I couldn't reword to trim it down somehow. But if you switch it to 2 sentences, you can keep pretty much all of it. I don't know if there's an opportunity to do that, or you may have to cut a detail here or there. I don't know. It's a little bit long. Okay. Let's see. I noticed that while I was reading. You have an echo on gum. And then glowing globes. While I love the visual of this sentence, you have a sound echo on gl. And I did notice that when I was reading. But that could also be my neurodivergent brain. And obviously it would read just fine silently. Disoriented, Evan wanted to know what happened over and over again. I kind of would put this again on the end. And I think we talked about this before. Am I not? To me, a soul is the spirit within you. And soul being singular, I believe is S-O-L-E, but it's also a fish. Let's see. Can soul be... Does soul mean only? Soul as an adjective being, you've got to be joking. Of course, I am right outside of a school, so of course it's going to be loud. Okay, does soul mean only? I'm looking it up. Here's the meaning. As an adjective, soul means S-O-L-E, means being the only one, single and isolated from others, as in the sole heir, the sole example. Synonyms: alone, lonesome, only, and solitary. So if you're referring to the spirit, then soul, S-O-U-L, would be appropriate, and S-O-L-E would be appropriate if you're wanting singular. Okay, let's see. I think this sentence is just a little bit long as well. That's the only reason I highlighted it. You can take that for what you will, and that ends our part 1. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. We're at 30 minutes. So we've got a sample of what it sounds like on the narrative side. I'm going to post a link to the original version as well, so our listeners can also listen to both, and maybe they could comment if they wanted, or you could discuss it in the writing group with your partners, and maybe submit this version for critique if you did like how it sounds. I do like it. I don't dislike it. It means more work for you, but if you're looking for words, it's an easy way to get them. So a lot to consider there. There's a lot to consider there. I'm actually glad you did this, and I think it'll help you make that final choice. I'm interested in what that's going to be, and I don't feel like my answer was particularly helpful, because I do like it. I don't know. I'm interested in hearing what you think after hearing this video. So we'll talk soon, and guys, I'll see you next time on Mystery Ride Reads.